Welcome, everyone. Today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Talos and how we drive actionable threat intelligence into our security portfolio to help protect our customers against the latest threats that are out there. It's important to understand this because when you're talking to your customers about our security products, understanding this level of what Talos does and how it helps protect our customers is important so they can understand the value that they get by deploying one of Cisco's security products or solutions on their network. To start off with, though, before we start talking about Talos, it's important to understand what the threat landscape looks like. If you think about it, software vulnerabilities are the common way that a lot of people think of when someone's talking about how I'm going to break into a network. Think of an attacker exploiting a vulnerability. Software vulnerabilities have always been there. We're always going to have mistakes in software. You would think that with all the focus on developing more secure software, the number of vulnerabilities would be decreasing. But in reality, they're starting to skyrocket. Part of that, that's just the way it is. People are looking more, trying to find more vulnerabilities. But the types of vulnerabilities are changing. There's not as many of those easy to take advantage of vulnerabilities that we just had a few years ago, where I could find one vulnerability, break into a lot of systems, get access, and do whatever I wanted. Now it's becoming more difficult. You're having to chain maybe 2 or 3 vulnerabilities together to achieve the results we could do with one vulnerability just a few years ago. Part of that is because operating system vendors are adding more protections to the operating system itself. Think of address-based randomization, different execution protections on different parts of memory. Those all make it harder to have that one easy-to-use vulnerability that we had just a few years ago. So, the attackers, they're finding ways in, but they're always also looking for easier ways to do stuff. Why spend a lot of effort, chain 2 or 3 vulnerabilities together if I can find an easier way to get to the same result? And one of the things we've seen the attackers do is they found out that users are that easy target. All of our networks have users on them. Users read email, they surf the web, and those receive data from people around the world. So if you think about it, if I'm an attacker, regardless of whatever kind of perimeter security you have, I can send an email to one of your users, and if they open the attachment, they can start running my malicious code, and I'm already into the network past your security protections. If they click on a link and download some malicious code. So the users have become that target, and you need to have protections in place that analyze that information, that look for those attacks coming in through email, through web, through the different vectors that the attackers are using. And it's really important to understand that, because if you don't understand where the attacks are coming from, it's harder to know that your network is protected against those attacks. And that's where Talos comes in. Cisco started acquiring different security products as part of their portfolio over the last few years, and we built a very strong security portfolio. But one of the things we realize is that the products by themselves are only so effective. They need actionable threat intelligence that's updated constantly to keep up with this changing landscape. And that's where Talos comes in. We took researchers from these different acquisitions. Think the VRT team as part of SourceFire, the Ironport team, the original track group that was part of Cisco, and we put all these researchers into one group, labeled it Talos, about 350 of us now, and all we do is look for new threats against our customers' networks, new malware, new attacks that are happening. And this protection comes for free. The customers don't purchase Talos. It's something that they get automatically by deploying one of our security products or solutions on their network. And that's really important. That's a value add that helps them, because a lot of companies don't have enough resources to spend to build a large team of security researchers, if they could even find them, because there's a shortage of security researchers out there. We even have a team that searches for 0 days as part of Talos. They're looking for 0 days in software, all kinds of software. And the important part of there is not only do we work with the vendors to get those holes patched, we also then can understand the tools and techniques that the attackers are using to try and break into software and find these vulnerabilities. So how does Talos do this protection that helps protect our customers? Well, first, it starts with visibility. If you think about it, you have to be able to see where these attacks are coming from before you can do anything to develop protection against them. Well, luckily, because we have such a broad portfolio, we have visibility into multiple facets of the network. Think firewall, endpoint, web, email. We even deploy threat traps around the world as another data point. All of these factors give us visibility into what's happening in the threat landscape. But we don't stop there. We also have partnerships with hundreds of different groups that we can use to see where new attacks are coming from, where new techniques are being used by the attackers. That allows us to keep our pulse on what's happening in the threat landscape. And now, once you see a new attack that's out there, the next step is to start analyzing it, developing actionable intelligence, something that can be used to block that threat. Simple example, an email comes in with an attachment. The attachment is malicious. We can immediately block that hash. We can drive out protection to all of our customers so that our security devices now stop blocking that file from coming into a network, whether it's an attachment, whether it's being downloaded through the web, whatever. But we don't want to stop there. We want to keep analyzing that. We want to take that malware apart, figure out who it's communicating with, what are the other indicators of compromise that we can use to even more effectively block this threat on our customer networks, whether that's domains, IP addresses, whether it's other malware that it's trying to download. All of that information allows us to develop more protections, even developing new rules for our IPS to block this threat when we see it being used on the network. Ultimately, we want to get the context behind a new threat. Is this purely something monetary, like ransomware? Is it a nation-state attack? Is its design a wiper that's designed to just destroy things? Or is it designed to steal intellectual property? Understanding that enables customers to determine, one, is this likely to target their network, but also if it is, what type of cleanup and remediation am I going to have to go through, because it's all different depending on what was the intent of the attackers in the first place. And finally, actual intelligence is great because that helps us protect against the threats, but we have to get that information out to the actual products where it can be used to block that new threat. And here's where our large customer base comes in handy, because once we see a threat on any of our customers, a new attack, a new piece of malware, we can then start protecting and blocking that threat on all of our customer networks. We don't want to stop when we just see that new one. Like I mentioned, we want to start taking it apart, figuring out how it works. We also want to keep monitoring once we understand how it works, so that we can evolve our protection as the attackers change their tactics. And then we don't want to just deploy it in one spot. If it came in through email, we want to make sure we block that everywhere on all the different security products that we have. So we want to send information on IOCs to web, to the endpoint, to the firewall with new rules, DNS, umbrella. We want to be able to protect against new domains that we want to block, new IPs. All of that helps us have a very wide defense in depth, if you will, posture on protecting against those new threats that are out there. And that's very important because it makes it harder for the attackers who are trying to avoid the defenses that are being put in place. If there's 3 or 4 different defenses they have to get around, that makes it much more difficult for them and harder to do. This entire process is really what makes Talos shine and why it's of value to our customers. We've developed a process here where we can use our visibility to turn that into actionable intelligence for the latest threats that are out there and drive a response that protects our customer networks very quickly against the latest threats that are out there. And this cycle feeds on itself. If you think about it, our visibility allows us to develop that intelligence, but then as we start responding, and maybe that work involves working with other partners, we can improve our visibility, which then enables us to get more actionable intelligence. And again, we just keep refining our protection so that the protection becomes stronger and stronger on our customers' networks. And that's really important because this landscape is far from static. Here's just a few of the different threats we've seen over the last couple of years. they're all over the map. If you think about it, just a few years ago, ransomware took off. It was the latest way for the attackers to monetize, make money. Well, a couple of years ago, they shifted. Cryptocurrency mining became the new go-to vector because it was a very easy way to make money. And they were just stealing CPU cycles. Much harder to detect because users didn't notice it. We've seen very sophisticated attacks. CCleaner and Yetna, they both involved supply chain attacks. CCleaner was designed to steal intellectual property. Yetna was purely a wiper designed to wipe out systems. We've seen attacks against IoT devices like Soho routers and home routers with the VPN filter attack. It compromised over 500,000 routers. We see commodity malware on a daily basis, remote access Trojans trying to steal credentials on the systems that they're running on so they can enhance their ability to go through the network. Attacks against major events like Olympic Destroyer. Even DNS has been targeted. Now they're trying to tunnel things through DNS, or like Sea Turtle, where they try to target registrar accounts where they can man in the middle of your traffic to what looks like your site so they can actually steal the credentials of users and then log into your network with valid credentials. Or even targeting messaging apps on our phones. Our phones are becoming much more of a target as well. That just shows you why you need a lot of researchers looking at this on an ongoing basis. Otherwise, you can never keep up with the way this landscape is changing. So at the end of the day, when you're talking to your customers, it's important to point out this is the point. We have the visibility to turn into actionable threat intelligence that we can use to protect our customers through all of our different security solutions. Regardless of whatever security solution is deployed on the network, it's going to be receiving updated threat intelligence, actionable threat intelligence from Talos to help protect against the latest threats that are out there. And all that happens automatically without the end user, the customer themselves, having to devote resources to analyzing the information. They get that automatically by just having that on their network. And it's important to keep abreast of what this landscape looks like. So information is the key. We're constantly blogging about new attacks that are out there. You can go to talosintelligence.com and look at our reputation center. You can read the blogs, see what the new attacks are that are out there. They give you a feel for how are these attacks changing. What areas are they targeting? Is it DNS? Is it email? Is it web? And understanding those enables you to step back and look at your network and say, could I have monitored this? Am I looking for that segment of the network? How would I have stopped this attack? If you've got our products, you can already look at the coverage section and say, hey, okay, I've already been covered against that. You may not have our products, but if you point someone to read about that, they may read about that and realize there's gaps in their security, and that entices them to think about purchasing a new product. You can listen to our podcast. It really gives you a high-level overview of what are some of those latest things to consider in the threat landscape. It's all important, but the key is there's lots of resources there, especially at our website, that give you an idea of what's happening in the security space. And this information I provided to you today should be enough to help you explain to most of your customers why it's important to deploy these security products and the benefit that Talos brings to that equation, how much more effective they are because of the intelligence that Talos drives into those products on a daily basis. Definitely send them to the blog, follow them on Twitter to keep a pulse of what's going there. But in some situations, maybe your customer needs a deep dive into what Talos does or some of the latest threats that are out there. In those cases, you can actually go and request someone from Talos Outreach or Talos Champion to come and talk to your customers. Maybe it's an hour-long remote talk or something in person potentially. The key is in those situations where you need a more in-depth analysis and explanation of Talos and some of the threats that are out there, we do have the capability to request that. You can put in your request and we will try and get someone who can help you explain that to your customers so they can understand the benefit of what Talos is. So hopefully this was a good overview for you to give you some useful information so you can understand how important it is to have actionable threat intelligence continually updating your products so that they can be more effective at blocking those latest threats that are out there.